In the land of Kofiso, where dusty roads hummed with the chatter of traders, and the sun always seemed to hang a little too close to the ground, there lived three young women whose lives were stitched together by fate, fire, and fragile choices. It all began during their time at the Kofiso National Youth Field, the compulsory program for fresh university graduates. That's where Tari, Zina, and Amaka met, three strangers from different corners of the country, yet instantly connected like threads in a single braid. Tari was the kind of girl who walked into a room and took all the air with her. Tall, fair-skinned, with eyes that sparkled like she knew something others didn't. She came from wealth. Her father, General Bako, was a respected, feared figure in the military. He ruled his house with the same iron will he used to command soldiers. But while her father enforced silence and obedience, Tari's mother, a gentlewoman who had given up everything for her children, drowned her daughter in affection. She spoiled Tari with everything, gifts, freedom, and blind approval. And so, Tari grew up in a golden cage, her movements policed, friendships forbidden, and joy rationed like water during drought. When her father finally retired and the family settled in the northern plains of Kofiso, they thought peace would come. But Tari's heart had already begun to rebel. By the time she got into university, she tore off the invisible chains her upbringing had wrapped around her. She partied harder than anyone, traveled often, drank without shame, and welcomed chaos like an old friend. Zina, on the other hand, was the daughter of Pastor Zuberi and Mama Kemi, a tall, dark-skinned beauty with a quiet fire burning behind her eyes. Raised in a modest Christian home, she was the second of 4 children. Her family didn't have much, but they had a deep love for God and each other. Every Sunday, Zina sat on the front pew, reciting memory verses with the confidence of a preacher's child. But behind her smile, questions brewed like a storm, doubts she never dared voice. She feared her parents' disappointment more than the devil himself. So, she played along, sang the hymns, bowed her head, and waited for the day she'd be free to find her own truth. That day came when she got accepted into the university. Freedom was sweet, and she wasted no time tasting every flavor it offered. Church became a distant echo, God a faded name. She embraced a life where she owed no one answers and bore no weight of expectations. Then came Amaka, the softest thread in their trio. Shorter, brown-skinned, with a heart too tender for the world. Her father sold grains and oil at the market, and her mother, Mama Aduke, was a strict schoolteacher who believed education was the only way out of poverty. Money was tight, but Amaka never lacked books or school supplies. As the firstborn, she was her parents' pride, and they pushed her hard to be the example. But Amaka had a weakness. She always chose the wrong friends. Her heart trusted too easily. Even when the road twisted into darkness, she followed with hope that it might lead to light. At the youth field, they were placed in the same platoon. And just like that, fate snapped its fingers. Tari's loud laugh caught Zina's attention. Zina's calm energy drew Amaka in. Within days, they were inseparable. Tari, the wild flame. Zina, the quiet storm. Amaka, the gentle breeze trying not to be swept away. After camp, Tari pulled some strings and slipped some money into the right hands. All three were posted to Ijura, a vibrant town known for its nightclubs and politicians. They found a small apartment, painted the walls bright colors, and made it their own. Tari and Zina got placements at the Ministry of Community Affairs, while Amaka was assigned to HopeWorks Initiative, a small NGO helping orphaned children. On the surface, life was beautiful. Music, laughter, shiny phones, and new clothes. But behind the glamour, choices were being made that would soon crack their world open. Tari, ever the hustler, had grown tired of relying on her father's shrinking allowance. When he told her to learn responsibility, she scoffed. Her definition of responsibility was survival, and survival for her meant pleasure for profit. She became an escort, not out of desperation, but ambition. "Why beg when men are offering?" she once said, flipping her wig with a smirk. Soon she introduced Zina and Amaka to the trade. At first, Zina hesitated, but the taste of quick money dulled her conscience. Amaka, as always, just followed. They were connected to men through a middlewoman named Madame Nyoka, a sharp-tongued ex-socialite with gold teeth and a laugh like broken glass. These weren't ordinary men. They were senators, commissioners, oil tycoons. The girls wore expensive dresses, sipped champagne, and smiled for photos they would never post. But not every smile came from joy. One trip, Zina was sent to entertain a high-ranking politician from the coast, Senator Daka, known for his charm in public and cruelty in private. At first, he seemed kind, even gentle, but when the hotel doors shut, so did his mask. Zina tried to leave when he grew rough, but he was stronger, and he liked when women struggled. He tied her hands, beat her till she bled, and broke her, in ways she couldn't name. When he was done, he lit a cigar like nothing had happened. Then he called a private doctor, tossed him a bundle of cash, and left Zina half-conscious on the floor. He bribed the hotel manager to take care of her and ensure she didn't leave the room until she could stand again. No police, no apology, just silence and scars. Back at home, Tari and Amaka waited, their phones quiet. Zina's number rang endlessly. When she finally returned, she didn't speak for 2 days. Just sat by the window staring, her hands trembling. And that's how the story of their friendship began, not with laughter alone, but with shadows creeping into the corners. The world they had chosen was painted in glitter, but behind it lurked things too dark to wash off. With the money Amaka was now making, she felt like a small miracle in her parents' eyes. Every month, she sent a portion back to her family in Egbako, and with each transfer came a lie. She told her parents she had been placed in a bank, one of the biggest in the region. Her mother wept with joy the first time she heard the news, and her father prayed loudly in their living room, thanking God for blessing their daughter with such favor. Pride filled their voices each time they spoke about her to their neighbors, but only Amaka knew the truth. Her job at the small Hopeworks initiative barely paid her enough to afford her bus fare. The real money came from something far darker. The girls continued their double lives. Monday to Friday, they showed up at their assigned offices, Tari and Zina at the ministry, Amaka at the NGO, smiling, answering phones, filing papers, and pretending they belonged there. But as Friday nights rolled in, the masks came off. Calls would come from Madame Nyoka, and the weekend would belong to strangers, powerful men, politicians, rich businessmen, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. The game had rules, but none that protected them. Then came the night that changed everything. It was supposed to be another trip, another client, but Zina was the one who got the call this time. The man in question was Senator Daka, known in hush circles for his wealth and secrets. Madame Nyoka arranged it, said everything was secure, but when Zina returned home, days late, she was barely recognizable. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. She didn't speak when she entered, just went straight to the shared room and lay down, her back to the door. Tari and Amaka rushed in, horrified. "Zina, what happened?" Tari cried out. Zina's voice came out in a whisper like wind through dry leaves. He tied me up, beat me, took what he wanted, then called a doctor, paid him to stitch me back together. I wasn't allowed to leave the room." They were frozen. Rage, shock, guilt, it all sank like rocks in their chests. Tari punched the wall. Amaka began to cry. But Zina, who had always been the calmest among them, just stared at the ceiling. They wanted to report it. Of course they did. But how could they? The senator had warned her, his voice colder than a knife. Speak to anyone, and I will erase your entire family from the face of the earth." They thought about their parents, the NYSC program, their names in the press, the disgrace, the danger. So, they did the only thing they felt they could. They buried it, deep, like something rotten they hoped would never crawl back up. But they did confront Madame Nyoka, or tried to. She denied everything, claimed she didn't know the senator had a reputation for violence. "He's a respectable man," she said, her gold teeth gleaming. "If something bad happened, how could I have known?" That was the last time Zina ever accepted a call from Nyoka. She was done. Her soul had been singed by fire, and she was ready to heal. She begged Tari and Amaka to walk away too. "We've done enough damage," she said, her voice now firm. "Let's stop before it kills one of us." But Tari laughed. "Zina, I'm not like you. I can handle myself. I know how to pick the right men. That was just bad luck." She had become addicted, not just to the money, but to the lifestyle. The champagne, the silk, the admiration. It made her feel powerful in a way she never had before. "I'll quit," she added. "But not until I've made enough to launch my fashion business. That's the plan." Amaka, on the other hand, was silent, fearful, haunted by Zina's swollen face, but also weighed down by her own lies. How could she confess to her parents that she didn't work in a bank, that she had lied, that her monthly transfers came from selling her soul weekend after weekend? The money was too good. Her family depended on it now. The guilt sat heavy on her chest, but the shame of exposure was even heavier. So they continued. Tari and Amaka still went on trips, but Zina turned her face back to the heavens. She started going to church again, not because her parents told her to, but because she had felt true evil, and it had driven her back to the one place that had once felt safe. She cried during worship, fell to her knees during prayer, and gave her life back to the God she had abandoned. She worked harder at the ministry, arriving early and staying late. And every night she prayed for her friends. She tried to talk to them, invited them to church, pleaded with them to stop, but it always ended in arguments. Tari would scoff, saying, "Don't preach at me, Zina. If you're disgusted, feel free to pack out. No one is forcing you to live here." Zina wanted to leave, but something inside her said to stay. "What if they need me one day?" she often thought. "What if I'm the only one left to help?" So she stayed, and tolerated, and prayed. 2 months before their passing out parade, another trip came. Tari and Amaka were contracted again, this time to escort politicians to Abemja, the capital city. But just before the weekend, Tari's client cancelled. Only Amaka had to go. The next morning, Saturday, Amaka received another offer, this time from a foreign businessman headed to Konu. It was a big trip, bigger money, and she had never left the country before. Her heart trembled as she considered it. She told Zina about it. "I don't know," she whispered. "It feels wrong. But the money, Zina, it's unbelievable." Zina grabbed her hand. "Then don't go. Stay, please. Cancel it." "I can't," Amaka replied, her eyes welling up. "I need it, but I promise this will be the last one. I swear it. No money is worth your life," Zina begged, but Amaka was already halfway out the door. She flew to Lagos, where she was to meet the client. When she arrived at the hotel address, her heart stopped. There were 4 men waiting, not one. They smiled, made jokes, tried to put her at ease. She looked around, unsure. "Which one of you is my client?" she asked. They laughed and handed her a drink. "You're with all of us," one of them said, raising his glass. Amaka forced a smile and sat down, but her mind raced, her heart thundered, and quietly she began to think of an escape. As Amaka sat in the guest room of the quiet bungalow, a strange stillness crept over her like a cold wind. The house was too neat, too silent, tucked in the corner of an unfamiliar neighborhood that smelled of dry leaves and distant secrets. Her heart raced beneath her carefully chosen outfit. She looked around the room, her mind spinning with excuses. Maybe she could say she was sick. Maybe her mother was unwell. Maybe she had to work. But none of them felt strong enough to break the invisible net around her. Finally, she stood up and faced the four men who had welcomed her earlier with strange smiles and glassy eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't want to go on this trip anymore. I've changed my mind. I'd like to leave now." For a second, none of them moved. Then one of the men shrugged and another gave her a nod. "No problem," one said. "You're free to go." Relief flooded her chest. "Thank you," she whispered and turned toward the door, heart thudding in her ears. She had barely touched the doorknob when she felt a strong grip wrap around her neck from behind. Everything went black. Far away, Tari had arrived in Abmia, the capital, dressed in her finest lace gown, her face powdered to perfection. She'd done this many times, and each trip felt easier than the last. Her client was a well-known senator with deep pockets and shallow morals. Tari was excited, not just for the money, but for the perks, shopping allowances, luxury meals, designer gifts. When she got to the high-rise hotel, the senator was already waiting. He welcomed her like a familiar friend, and within minutes they were sipping champagne and talking nonsense. Halfway through their conversation, he leaned closer and whispered, "My friend will be joining us later. He's very wealthy. And he likes young women like you. You'll make double tonight." Tari smiled wide. The more, the better. It was. A while before the second man arrived. By then, Tari was lounging on the bed, laughing softly, enjoying the expensive wine. But when the door opened and the second man stepped in, the laughter died in her throat. It was her father, General Barco. Everything froze. Her body, her breath, even time itself. Their eyes locked, and in that long, horrible moment, emotions exploded between them. Horror, shame, rage, pain. Her father didn't say a word. His face crumbled with devastation. Then it twisted with fury. He stormed toward her, grabbed her clothes from the chair, and flung them at her. "Get out!" he growled, each word heavier than a slap. Tari scrambled, barely able to see through. Her tears snatched her clothes and ran out of the room barefoot. As she reached the lobby doors, a loud gunshot cracked through the air. She turned in panic and raced back up the stairs, past screaming guests, past confused staff, until she reached the room again. The senator lay in a pool of blood. Her father stood beside the body, holding the smoking gun in both hands, breathing heavily. He didn't look at her, just stared at the corpse of the man who had unknowingly brought his daughter to ruin. Back in a place unknown, Amaka slowly opened. Her eyes, her head pounded. The room was dark and filled with the scent of sweat, fear, and hopelessness. Other girls sat huddled in corners, some crying, others too broken to make a sound. Her clothes were gone. Her body ached. She felt sick. She tried to ask, "Where are we?" One girl, her face bruised, whispered, "They took our phones." "We don't know." The truth hit her like a fist. She had been trafficked. Panic filled her lungs. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but there was nowhere to go. The doors were locked, the windows had bars, and the air itself felt like a cage. Days passed. No food, no sunlight. The only thing they had was a leaking pipe in the bathroom that trickled water slowly into a bucket. They shared it, all 22 of them. Then one day the door creaked open. Armed men entered. They handed out blindfolds. "Put these on," one barked. "And listen. If anyone tries anything stupid, we will shoot." Terror guided their trembling hands as they obeyed. Their wrists were tied behind their backs, and soon they were marched out like cattle. They felt the motion of a vehicle, but no one knew where it was going. No one dared speak. Some wept silently. Others had already given up. After what felt like hours, the truck stopped. A handful of girls were pulled out. The rest continued. Their fate unknown, Amaka was among the 8 who were dropped off. They were led into a large compound with tall metal gates and high walls. Inside was a pristine building, painted white, hiding its darkness behind clean windows and flower pots. They were taken to a room, clean, air-conditioned, strange. They were given new clothes, bright wigs, and boxes of makeup. Confused and exhausted, they dressed in silence. Hours later, a woman entered the room. She was tall, pale, with long blonde hair and an accent thick as oil, definitely not from Kofiso. She looked at them like they were items in a store. "Welcome to Nera," she said coolly. "You're here because powerful men paid for you. You are not to talk unless spoken to. You will do whatever your clients desire, and you will do it with a smile." The room remained silent. "You may feel anger now," she continued, pacing, "but fight it. Obey, and you will be taken care of. Disobey." She paused, letting the silence grow heavy, "and you will disappear." She smiled then, but it was the kind of smile that made your blood turn cold. "You belong to us now." And just like that, Amaka's nightmare had fully begun, each passing day. Amaka woke up in the foreign land of Nera with a sinking feeling in her chest. The morning air brought no hope, only fear. She and the other girls were kept like property, taken from one room to another, handed off to male clients like gifts, wrapped in false smiles and powdered faces. Most of the men were older, their faces cracked with age, but their desires twisted and cruel. Each had his own wicked fantasy, some too disturbing to describe. Amaka never knew what the day would bring. One day she'd be forced to laugh at dry jokes. The next, she'd be drugged and stripped of her will. She lived in a state of numb obedience, waiting for it to end, unsure if that meant escape or death. On the worst nights, she cried quietly in the corner of her room, whispering to the God she once pushed aside. "Forgive me," she would plead. "I was greedy. I wanted more. I should have listened to Zina." Memories of home would flood in, her father hauling sacks of yam in the hot sun, her mother staying up late sewing clothes just to earn a little extra, her siblings running barefoot in their small compound. Would they be searching for her, or had they already given up? If anyone knew what had happened, it would be Zina. Back in Ijure, Tari had returned from Abmia shattered. Her father's crime had become front-page news across the country. The once revered General Bako had been arrested after killing the senator in the hotel. The military took over the case immediately. Her mother, heartbroken and humiliated, called her in tears. "Come home, my daughter, just come home." But Tari couldn't face them, not after they found out what she had really been doing. Her mother was devastated to learn her daughter had never worked at the ministry, but had instead been traveling around the country, sleeping with strangers. Worse still, her husband, Tari's own father, had unknowingly become one of those strangers. The scandal spread like wildfire, crossing borders, finding its way to TV screens and social media feeds. Tari stopped answering calls. She wept for days and refused to leave her room. Zina stayed by her side, trying to comfort her. But the shame sat on Tari like a stone she couldn't lift. Months passed. The National Youth Service ended, but Amaka was still missing. Police questioned Zina repeatedly. She told them everything she knew, names, places, dates. Madame Nyoka was arrested. So was Timmy, their middleman. Under pressure, Timmy confessed to arranging girls for high-profile men, but he insisted. He never met the clients face to face. "It was all through the phone," he said. "They paid me, I connected them, that's all." Still, he was held in custody. 2 years crawled by. Amaka had tried to escape 3 times. Each time she was caught. The first time they beat her. The second time they starved her for 3 days. The third time Her so-called owner looked her in the eye and said, "If you try that again, I won't be so forgiving." By then, the light inside her had nearly died. One morning, she woke up, looked in the mirror, and didn't recognize the girl staring back. Her skin was dull, her eyes hollow. She'd become a ghost of herself, a shell that walked and smiled and obeyed, while her spirit hovered somewhere above, watching and waiting for the end. That morning, she got dressed for her next client. She no longer prayed for rescue, only rest. She had been drugged before, she had been beaten, she had endured pain no one should ever know. But this time felt different. The man was in his late 50s. He said very little, just smiled, injected something into her arm and waited. For the first time in years, Amaka felt peace. Not the joyful kind, but the kind that comes when there's nothing left to fight for. Her body relaxed, her breath slowed, darkness wrapped around her like a blanket, and then silence. Back in Kofiso, time moved on. 3 years since Amaka had disappeared. Her family held vigils, then funerals, then silence. The trial for General Bako concluded. The court found him guilty of manslaughter. The man who once commanded armies now sat in a prison cell, sentenced to life. His face, once proud, was now hollowed by guilt. Timmy, the middleman, was sentenced to 10 years in prison with hard labor and ordered to pay a fine of 1 million naira. Tari couldn't bear the weight of what she had caused. She left the country with no farewell and vowed never to return. Her parents never saw her again. She wandered through foreign lands, searching for something that resembled forgiveness, but never quite finding it. And Zina stood firm. She clung to her faith like a rope tied around her waist, pulling her out of the pit she had once fallen into. She believed with all her heart that God had allowed her to walk through that valley, not to destroy her, but to use her. And so she began to speak. She joined a group called Daughters of Valor, a powerful NGO that fought against human trafficking. She shared her story at schools, conferences, churches, anywhere someone would listen. She cried when she spoke. She held the hands of survivors. She marched with banners in cities across the world. Her story became a seed that grew into change. She told young girls, there is always a choice no matter how small, and every step you take toward greed, toward secrets, leads somewhere. Don't let it be to the pit. And she never stopped praying for Amaka, whether she was lost, enslaved, or gone. Because hope, no matter how faint, still lives in the quietest corners of a faithful heart. Lessons to remember. There is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way to death. The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father the guilt of the son.